Welcome, everyone, to the 18th Annual MIT Sloan CIO Symposium, First Digital Edition. I'm your host, Alan Tate, and this is Episode 6, Accelerated Digital Transformation. Where will we land? Well, we're going to find out today. For questions, please use Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You feel free to chat with each other, but we will not be monitoring chat for questions. If you use social media, use hashtag MITCIO and join the online discussion in our community. Post to the 2021 Symposium program under the topic Digitalization Trends. And now we have our moderator, Jason Sfaelos. He is the Director of Business Development, Technology Partners, and Neural Data Systems at Equinix. He has a BS from James Madison University and an MBA from George Washington University. He's also a person who went the extra mile to accommodate schedules of some very busy and very talented CIOs. Please join me in welcoming Jason Sfaelos.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited about today's panel, which is, as mentioned, focused on digital transformation, its accelerated pace of adoption, especially over this past year, and hearing from the experiences from some key industry leaders. As mentioned, my name is Jason Sfaelos. I'm the Director of Global Business Development at Equinix. For those of you that are not familiar with Equinix, we are the largest data center provider in the world with over 200 data centers covering upwards of 60 metros in 30 countries around. And we focus on really enabling the service providers to deliver and enterprises to adopt solutions around digital transformation, which is, of course, our topic for today. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by technology leaders from National Grid, CDM Smith, and British Telecom. I'm now going to invite them to introduce themselves and their companies. Andy, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Thank you, Jason, and good morning, good afternoon to all in attendance. I'm Andy Karaboutis, Group Chief Information and Digital Officer at National Grid. National Grid is a British multinational utility company where we do electricity and gas transmission and distribution across the UK, parts of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. At National Grid, I'm in charge of digital transformation, digital adoption, IT security, and physical and cyber security.
Excellent. Andy, thank you very much. David?
Thank you, Jason. My name is David Neitz. I'm the CIO for CDM Smith. CDM Smith is a global engineering construction firm. We specialize in transportation, wastewater, water treatment plants, environmental work. As CIO, I was brought in to help transform the internal organization to adopt digital technologies, but also how we better serve our clients.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. And last but not least, Harmeen.
Thanks, and good afternoon, and good morning, good evening, everyone. Really great to be here. I'm Harmine Mehta. I'm the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer here at British Telecommunications, so at BT. And I took on the role just a couple of months ago. And I tell you, between everything else, swapping countries and such times, it's been a roller coaster ride the last few weeks. But I think what I'm really excited about is everything that we are doing here at BT to build a better future for both our customers as well as for the country and for ourselves. And I think the pleasure of doing that as part of my job is to bring about growth within the organization, manage, of course, the whole technology side of things as well, but more importantly, also building up new revenue streams and new businesses for BT to move forward, and hence bringing a lot of innovation and digitizing both the lives of our customers as well as our frontline and, of course, internally within the organization as well. So really excited to be here.
Fantastic. I love it. 3 leaders, 3 industries, 1 pandemic. and I'm sure a mountain of initiatives everyone's dealing with. Why don't we go ahead and kick things off with a general question that I'm sure the audience can relate to, and we'll open this up to the panel at large. Can you describe some of the key initiatives you focused on to ensure your teams continued to be productive, secure, and engaged? And Harmeen, if you would like to lead things off.
Sure. I think I would actually say that, being in a digital role, the pandemic has done more for driving digitization across our consumers and the companies than maybe we as leaders did in the last couple of years. There was a massive shift of the consumers as well. And when you're in lockdown and there is no other ways, even if you've been a reluctant user of paying money online or purchasing online, that was the only way for you to get things. So I think it has changed the basics of and principles and beliefs and how we work, how we live, and how we interact with each other massively. And I think most of the organizations, all of us have had to cope with, huge amounts of people working across the globe, but working from home. And I think there's no amount of BCP DR ever done that could have anticipated a world where at one point around April, May last year, if my stats are not wrong, almost 3.5 billion people around the world were in lockdown at the same time. And I think nothing could have prepared for that. So everything saying, oh, we're going to fall over from one country to another or from one side to another. I mean, everything was thrown out of the water and we all had to think on our feet. But I think most of the organizations, and I would say big kudos to all the corporates out there who did really well to cope up with that. And I think as being in telecommunications, what gives me special pride is that we had a very different job. Our first job was to keep the country running. Then it came to keep the company running. And I think just including the governments, the whole infrastructure that runs on telecommunications, that sense of responsibility was very high. And I think the other piece I feel the pandemic has done is it has restored a lot of the public confidence in telecoms as well. But I think it's brought a lot of pride for those of us who work in this industry, saying, as part of essential services and as part of being the glue that kept society together. I mean, we could play our little role, but it led to a lot of innovation within the company. It led to a lot of acceleration of digital as well. And, and me and my department is probably the classic example of that. But I think much more than that, it led to a shift in mindset for every person who is skeptical out there, or whether it's a consumer or within the company or anywhere, saying, oh, is this really the future? I mean, everybody now knows this is the future. And the future is not in the future. The future is here and now.
Fantastic. David, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm really excited that a lot of the investments we've made historically have paid off as the pandemic hit. We also have this unique challenge that, for example, the clients that we serve, they actually have to have community outreach and engagement to get feedback if they want to extend a highway system, if they want to introduce a new wastewater treatment plant, whatever they want to do, they have to get community engagement. And they really didn't have any technologies to do that. So we actually quickly developed some immersive technologies that allowed them to engage their stakeholders so that we could continue to move our projects forward. Additionally, a couple of other things we do as a company, we have design reviews. Traditionally, we would get together and review those designs, but that wasn't really practical. We'd include our clients. So we had previously developed this immersive experience using the HoloLens, where we could take our three-dimensional designs, load them up into the cloud, and have the ability to collaborate together and have the remote participants show up as avatars in your house, in your room. And then you could walk around, you could see them, you could see their gaze, see what they're looking at, and we could collaborate on those designs using that collaborative technology. Additionally, we do a lot of work in remote locations. You may recall there was a major earthquake in Nepal, and we were awarded a USAID project to rebuild 12 schools and 6 hospitals. And A critical part of that is that we have some design reviews and actually walkthroughs of the actual hospital, or in this case, a school. And we couldn't fly everyone in there, even though we're critical people and we were designated as critical. We still couldn't get everyone there. So we actually also used the HoloLens there as well with this remote assist capability. So that remote participants, both from USAID, from the client that we're serving in Nepal, the Nepal government, and our experts could actually walk through our designs together and not just see it like you may do with FaceTime or trying to share something. It's holographic markups as well was an important part of that, because sometimes you get a little confused as what you're looking at. And to get everyone on the same page and be able to see what others are seeing and then holographically mark up areas of question or concern, and then it sticks there in space. So if you look away and look back, they're still there holographically marked up so you can refer to it. So it's really helped us adopt these technologies that we've invested in earlier and start using them to actually continue to help serve our clients better.
That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, I'll be honest. In fact, wasn't it Ready Player One? But no, that is very interesting to say the least. Andy, how about yourself?
Yeah, so Jason, like Harmeen and David, we had to fall back on our roots and what we knew. As a company, our mission at National Grid is to bring energy to life safely and securely. We rallied around that mission and said, what do we now need to do working differently to continue to fulfill that? People without energy, we saw this in Texas, et cetera, huge hardship. So what we did, and it was mid-March, and I don't think any of us will forget that time, where everyone stayed home and we had to ensure that we were continuing to bring energy to life. We rallied around safety and security and said, first of all, how do we stand up 20,000 people that are either out in the field that need to continue work and continue to drive work orders, turn on utility energy on and off, et cetera, repairs, and ensure resiliency and safety while employees were working from home. We did tactical things and we did very strategic things. Tactically, we worried about having chairs, computers, laptops, everything that our employees needed. Our help desks as IT organizations have always been remote, but our call centers have not. We stood up hundreds of people at home to be able to work in call centers. Our operations centers, our security and our core national infrastructure operations centers needed to be safe from the virus. This required that we actually bought trailers and sequestered people. They left their families and were on site at the operations centers to ensure that as we monitor for cybersecurity and we monitor for continuity of flow of energy, that those people were actually safe from the virus. Because at that time, we obviously didn't know what we know now, nor did we have vaccinations. So firing on 360 degrees, all cylinders, was actually the name of the game. And it was a blending of technology, a blending of processes, and a blending of the way we deliver these things, which, by the way, is at the essence of digital. And so as we really, really focused on what was core and pivotal to the company to keep energy flowing, we looked at all aspects of it, and there were action plans, work streams, tactical, strategic, et cetera. We kept our board engaged, and we actually treated this as a crisis management plan and had a gold command in place. And I'm very proud to say that we came out of it in a very positive light. Our net promoter scores internally, externally, were very favorably received. And that's what happens when you rally a team during a crisis. So everything, again, Jason, from laptops to security, Zscaler and Microsoft Teams were rolled out for us during this pandemic as a result of recognizing what we needed to do for collaboration and security. So multifaceted is how I would talk about it, and everyone playing their role.
I have to believe that the entire audience probably can relate to some of the comments from all three of our panelists, what we've all been dealing with across the globe. This isn't a US issue. This isn't a UK issue. This is a truly a global issue that everyone has been facing. And one thing that Andy had mentioned, and I know from my conversation with Harmeen the other day, cybersecurity has obviously become an even greater impact than what we had even seen before. And I'm going to direct this question to Harmeen to start, because when we were talking the other day, it was around what you saw was a 600% increase in cyber attacks around the world last year. And Harmeen, I was wondering if you could just describe or talk about what you've done, whether in the current role at BT or even in previous roles, to train your internal teams to help not just the enterprise, but even the consumer deal with those cybersecurity concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as the whole world learned to operate in a different way, a lot of companies which weren't ready for remote working in a normal way had to find different ways of opening access for all kinds of people from their homes, etc. And I think that just kind of became the plane for all the bad guys out there to go and see that how they can milk that situation and make the most out of it. And whether it was phishing attacks, which were up almost 600%, or it was DDoS attacks as well that were up to the tune of 450 or 500%, and social engineering, because a lot of payments were happening online and taking control of different payment apps on the phone. I mean, it was all over the place and all over the globe. And I know there was a lot of discussions happening around that time about how we can help different companies who are facing all this, and of course, protect our own organizations as well. But I think the biggest piece that happened for cybersec was also that just the core infrastructure and running it in a different way. And as you had to move to the cloud and more to SaaS applications and enable, whether it's your, kind of your web-enabled firewalls or whatever. I mean, just that basics as well. You had to do everything in hours and days, and you didn't have the luxury of weeks and months the way companies would normally do it. And I think that really, we had a lot of our cybersecurity teams around the world really going through, standing up with their customers and, of course, doing it internally within the company as well. I mean, at BT, we run a very significantly large business of cybersecurity, and we support, hundreds of customers around the globe around this in many, in across many countries. And we have over 3,000 security experts who are protecting our operations for our customers. And I must say, they've been round the clock during this entire time as the attacks have been on a rise. We've seen thousands of attacks a day on all kinds of companies, utility companies, financial services, banks, governments. I mean, you name it, even manufacturing companies. And some of them have been just with the sole goal of ciphering data out. Others have been with the sole goal of, corrupting something in the system. But the most, some of the most scary ones are more like what happened with SolarWinds, for example, where something that was done a long while ago is sitting dormant in your environment. You don't even know about it, so it's never caught till it decides to activate itself. I mean, it's protection against a lot of those things as well. I guess, I find the world of cybersecurity really fascinating because, you get to fulfill a lot of your fantasies. You have to think like a criminal, but have a heart of gold. And your job is to try and at least keep in step with the bad guys and not get ahead of them. But it's, I think it really keeps you on your toes, and it makes you think in different ways, because your job is kind of to anticipate what's about to happen. Because, cybersecurity is just about that. Once the guy is in your door, I mean, you've failed no matter what you say. And I think that's what our job is. But it's a world that's reinventing itself every single moment. And but it's been really, really exciting. And I think the amount we spend, millions and millions of pounds every year on just research and development cybersecurity. And I think that we've never seen as much value come out of that as we have over the course of this last year. So it just justifies, but it also changed the pace of thinking, doing things. And I think that's something, that's with us to stay for the coming months and years. And I think that's probably the only tiny little silver lining that comes out of all this.
And I think an interesting aspect is all three of us are dealing with critical infrastructure. We build, water treatment plants. If you want to shut down a city, you shut down the power, shut down the communications, shut down the water. Pretty much, you want to bring it to a sneeze. So we have this dichotomy where we want to improve the efficiency of the operations of these critical assets, and the digital twin concept of the IoT devices are an important part of that. To get the benefit that we know we can get by really creating these digital twins. For example, in our case, we create a hydraulic model, have a digital twin that's fed with a hydraulic model plus all the sensors, and then we can actually improve the operational efficiency significantly. But every one of those IoT devices now opens up an attack vector. So how do you get the benefit of us, really improving our clients' operations of their critical infrastructure, yet get the protection that's necessary? So we found it necessary to really make sure that we think of cybersecurity first. We design it into what we do, and then we're looking at other technologies. Is blockchain a viable option for us to actually have these secure communications happening that are necessary only at the edge, some of what we do, but also in the cloud that's necessary. So I think that's a common challenge we have of trying to advance the digital for our clients, yet securing it with these new exposure points with IoT.
I think Jason David just reminded me of one very interesting stat that I remember reading a few weeks back. The ransomware damage costs, they were predicted to be about, I think, around $11 billion in 2019. But in 2021, that's estimated to go up well over 20 billion. That's almost doubled completely during this 1.5 year of the pandemic. And that's the reason why a lot of companies are also opting for cyber insurance. And it's changing the dynamic of how we think. But I just thought that was a very interesting stat.
No longer a nice to have or a think about it after the fact. But as David said, it has to be part of the planning for any new initiative. And it was mentioned around IoT, which, of course, Andy, I want to talk to you around not just how IoT is used, but, when often we think about perhaps National Grid, we jump to what you do, which is around how we power homes and offices. Many likely don't understand the depths of data available to the company and the analytics that are leveraged in the industry as a whole. Perhaps you can give us kind of an overview on how you use data as a means to, as you were describing earlier, maintain those services, not just during the pandemic, but during any type of emergency, as well as how this could perhaps be used to evolve the company or the industry over time.
Yeah, so interestingly, Jason, a little known fact, but utility companies have the most data of any other industry. And a close second is the auto industry, because if you think about different frequency and waveforms, we can actually see where usage is, appliances, when they're on and off, and things like that. And so the plethora of data that we have around consumption, the plethora of data that we have around our devices, because we do have those edge compute technologies that monitor the health of our assets, and actually we do processing at the edge. And any anomalies we report back. Instead of reporting plethora of data coming back in on all information, we take anomalies and we'll report it back centrally up into the cloud and into our various applications. The insights we have is tremendous. For this reason, our digital strategy, which is, one and the same as with our digital and data strategy, is around three key areas: our customer insights, engagement, and enablement. Looking at our operations, our asset lifecycle management, and asset health. And along those lines, ensuring the security of our teams as they're keeping those assets up and running, and then the digital employee. All of those require us to have a data platform that provides insight where we can marry information at a very tactical level We look at weather information, we look at usage information, we look at forecasts, and we're able to predict when we're going to have peaks, storms, et cetera, and prepare the company for that. So that's sort of the informative that allows us to have those insights. On what we call blue sky days, we don't have to know any longer look at predictive or prescriptive maintenance type functionality where it says, you should do this to your transformers every so often, of course, according to manufacturing plans, but we can actually look at and sense the health of these assets and do predictive maintenance and predictive efforts to ensure that, again, as I said before, we bring energy to life and we understand the life of, or the health of our assets. All of those things are part of our digital plan and so critically important to be able to predict and to help our customers as we look into the climate, change and energy future and zero carbon and different wishes and wants and desires and renewable energies. There's so many facets to the future of energy, and utilities as a facilitator of that is tremendous. IoT and edge compute is at the cornerstone of how we can bring that data in and gain insights. And back to the last question, it also keeps me up at night because now your attack surfaces are so many more. Anything with an IP address is something that can get infiltrated. So while on the one hand, I can call us the schizophrenic society of, we want those insights, we want those assets talking to us, we want to understand the health. On the other hand, we are, acutely aware that all of those are opportunities for an infiltration or an attack. And I'm sure Harmeen and David, sense that as well. So exciting and proceeding with caution is how I would say our data platforms and our digital strategy is.
Yes, and you're hitting on a number of key threads that we've not only discussed as a panel ahead of time, but certainly that we hear from our customers and providers that keeps them up at night as well. So actually, I'd like to turn over to Harmeen briefly. We've talked about IoT from the position of, I don't want to call it the consumer side, but how both David and Andy are leveraging this within their environment. Harmeen, you often would approach IoT perhaps from a different perspective from that of BT, the telecom provider, the ability for all of these endpoints to actually be able to communicate with one another and securely. Could you maybe discuss how you are foreseeing that impact, how it has come about yet, and as well as whether or not we've reached that pinnacle of adoption based on perhaps the less than standardized protocols across IoT devices?
Yeah, and I think IoT is still one of those things that, a couple of years ago, we thought, in the next 5 years, it's going to take off in a very big way. And I think it is, but it's actually, in a way, I'm glad to see that it's taking off with a purpose rather than just randomly taking off, which was kind of the original, the original thought process. But because it's equally scary when you read an article, which is what happened about 11 months ago about, a major corporation getting hacked through an IoT device in their controlling their AC system. And, that's an inlet into the servers of a major corporation. And you sit back and say, this is how vulnerable we get if we don't do this in a responsible manner. But at the same time, I think the power and the freedom it's going to unleash on both companies as well as individuals is going to be very, very different. IoT it's such a wide-ranging beast. It's actually autonomous cars are a different form of kind of internet connectivity of things, and a very different thing than a sensor that's helping provide healthcare in a home for an elderly person, and just monitoring that if you normally get up at 8 o'clock and have your coffee, and if you've not done that by 9:30, it'll set off alarms and inform the kids that, something might not be right, and so on and so forth. To again, going back to smart meters or lighting or utilities, where it has a very different very different application. It's a fascinating field, and I think there is a lot more that we need to do there. But at the same time, there's something, I think if we can the world can consolidate a little bit on standardization, it'll actually help pick up speed. I mean, the amount of protocols that IoT can run on today, and, from Z-Wave to Zigbee to just on Bluetooth as well. I mean, and then you talk about, what telecoms have to provide is whether it's NB-IoT or it's LoRa, which is low range. I think what we've not done well as an industry is truly come together and make some hard choices and say, why don't we converge around the globe around this and put this, because it makes, imagine if I'm a device manufacturer for IoT device, I actually have to produce a device at 10 times the cost because I don't know who's going to use it. Korea Telecom is going to use it, or BT is going to use it, or Airtel is going to use it. And hence, in different countries, different approaches, different spectrum, different kinds of technology. Do I support 2G, 3G, 4G? Do I run it on NB-IoT? I mean, you have to provide all of those. And I think that's not how it's going to be sustainable. So I think somewhere there's a little bit more work to be done. But at the same time, it's companies like, David's or Andy's, when we collaborate together and say, this is a purpose and this is what we want to do, and you start designing around that to fit that purpose, some of those choices actually become very obvious. But doing that across an industry, I think if we can do more of that, we will actually accelerate this industry like nothing else. Otherwise, it'll get so fragmented that we won't get the use out of it just because the cost of the devices. I mean, if Andy is to put it in every single meter and every single device, I mean, she expects that it'll come at a much lower cost than coming at hundreds of dollars per device. It's something that's going to become unaffordable for even large companies. So I think we've still got a long way to go, but I have to say it's a very fascinating field. So I'm very excited about, whether it's a flying car or anything, but, we're going to be behind it. So that's the exciting part.
Yeah, and I think all of us
at low cost.
Yeah, and I think it's
that low cost, Andy.
I think it's important too that the vision of a smart city and what that can do to help improve life, commerce, everything. Traditionally you think of a smart city just being transportation. That's only a small part of it. It's actually the power component of it. It's water, wastewater. It's the watershed around that. It's the communication component around all of that. So we've actually assisted the city of Columbus, Ohio, win the Smart City Initiative from the U.S. Department of Transportation. And they're doing some really interesting things with an integrated open data exchange platform that allows collaboration across universities, other organizations, so that we can share this information. A key is to have something like that concept, so that we can actually get the benefit and value, and opening it up for others to collaborate on using artificial intelligence and other technologies, which I think really is going to change things. For example, we're doing some truck platooning, which can actually revolutionize if you combine truck platooning with autonomous trucks and electric ones. You can actually change the whole dynamic of how freight is transferred across the country. And just knowing how you can have this infrastructure to autonomous vehicle communication, plus how we all work together in some common framework of information exchange, that could really unleash the power. Now we have all this the privacy concerns across the globe that really adds an additional challenge to understand all of the reality of it. But having that vision and us all working together, there are many other industries that I think would benefit from. Manufacturing can benefit. Any industry can benefit from this kind of collaborative approach to how we leverage this information to achieve, I think, not just a smart city, expand it out. Ultimately, you can expand it out to beyond just a city, to a broader ecosystem. I think that could really have an impact on global commerce and just actually improving the life of developing countries that we're very proud that we're helping bring them the capability to be more self-sufficient as well.
Hey, Jason, I'd like to just add to something because I think Harmeen and David have both said something just really pivotal and something the pandemic has done for us. We've had to accelerate digital because there was a call to action. There was a massive call to action and we had no choice. And so it wasn't about budget discussions. It was about enabling, a workforce and keeping the world going, as Harmeen said. And so I think we're going to take that as a silver lining as we continue to drive our digital and our data strategies, whether it's for smart city, if it's for aligning on common protocols and aligned methodologies, as Harmeen said, it's going to actually cause us to crystallize. When I look at National Grid and I look at the utility or energy industry and some of the stuff that David said, we think about climate change and we think about the fact that going forward, while everyone went home, 65%, I just saw a survey of employees, don't actually want to go back to work. And so we may have to continue to accommodate that. So many companies have made pronouncements on zero carbon. And the administration in the US has talked about, by 2030, we have big pronouncements on renewable energy. Those calls to action, whether you take them in conjunction with each other or individually, are going to really drive focus around digitalization and data. And to Harmeen's point, get us off of the science experiments, right? Which are also good, right? But, look at this great edge compute, look at the, robotics dog, look at this digital twin. All of those disparate and very good efforts are going to have to crystallize and come together to achieve some of these big initiatives. And personally, that's something that I think is a silver lining coming out of COVID and the pandemic. It's doubled down that focus and crystallization for what we need to do.
So being able to find that commonality, perhaps not just within an industry, but across them as a means to drive scale and impact. I completely agree. And actually, relative to new technologies, David, something you and I had talked about at one point, what are some of those new technologies you're leveraging that are part of the, let's say, critical value, not only to CDM Smith, but also relevant to other industries? We were talking about some of the low orbit satellite, for instance.
Yeah, so we're actually looking at, we're taking a broader perspective of sensors. So you look at cameras are a sensor, low orbit satellites are a sensor, drones with their sensors, it's all a sensor-based element. How do you take those sensors and drive additional value out of them? So, for example, a lot of our clients have CCT cameras on their highway system. And we've built an edge compute device using the Jetson Nano NVIDIA device, which is extremely powerful in processing simultaneous camera feeds, to train an AI model, computer vision model, to detect a wrong-way driver. You have someone sitting in a command center trying to monitor, 300 screens. How are they going to? Hopefully, they'll catch that. But why rely on a human to be observant and alert? Have the ability for us to detect wrong-way driver. Erratic lane usage. We can see when someone's using lanes in an erratic way. It could be an impaired driver, or it could just be that it's the way the highways were set up around a work zone. Our clients are very concerned about safety in a work zone. How is traffic behaving in that work zone? Low orbit satellites. Actually, this was a 2020 MIT breakthrough technologies, the mega constellation of low orbit satellites. We're leveraging that to work with companies like National Grid, with railroad companies, to actually have the ability to detect vegetation elements that can interfere with power lines. It can then detect also vertical, horizontal movement of railroad tracks, because the disruption to freight and a railway system can be a challenge. But if we can take that sensor, add in weather information, add in additional information to look for moisture and soil content, and then apply our geology expertise, and now we can get predictive. We can start to then predict when there's a potential landslide that could take out a track, or a track movement that's going to be disruptive, or vegetation that's going to interfere with your power system. All of those sensors, I think, just looking at them as another data source to be combined with other sources to drive new insights and predictive capabilities that actually wasn't really necessarily possible before. For example, we're flying our construction sites on a daily basis so that we can then detect what's happening on the site. If there's any safety issues, we can also track progress, calculate volumes of material that's been moved. All of that would have been cost prohibitive before, because you can't fly an airplane every day. That'd be very expensive. Now you could just that price point. We do it for inspection of bridges. We have autonomous driven drones that now can fly underneath. They don't have to have the GPS signal to fly, and have the ability to train it to look for issues. It saves our employees. Some of them actually have to put on climbing gear and really, they do. They get a climbing gear and go underneath there. And I'm sure National Grid has to do similar things where they put people at risk to do these critical inspections. Why not put a drone in place to do that and train it to be observant? It never blinks. You can always refer back to it and record it, and then compare it time over time. One of the interesting things, one of our bridge engineers said that, remember the Minneapolis bridge collapse where they actually had the element of the bridge that was too thin of a piece of steel? If you had flown that bridge with the sensor of detecting the heat signature, you would have detected that piece of metal was not absorbing or reflecting heat at the same rate. And you could have compared that and said, what's wrong with those braces? They're supposed to be of the similar absorbing of heat, and they're not. And you could have detected that. And think of how many lives could have been saved by doing that. So applying these new ways of looking, not just visual, but also in the environmental world. We do a lot of hazardous site cleanup, EPA Superfund sites. Don't want to put a human in that place, but get a multispectral analysis of the chemicals, do night flights. Now the FAA has just approved night flights so that we can fly at night, so that we can then look for heat signatures, to look for seepage that wouldn't be detected normally by other methods. So just really exciting what's been emerging with sensors and how we're leveraging that.
Just to add to David's point, even taking it a step further, our vegetation management, where we have to make sure that trees are clear of lines. I'm sure we've all read a lot about that in the last year. We've had people on helicopters hanging off doing visual inspections. We've moved then to, the drones, as David said. And now imagine the world where we've got LiDAR and satellite capabilities such that you can take such high frequency and highly visible pictures that all you need to do is get, you don't even need a drone. So the whole definition of digital, applying, frontier technologies, reimagining through those technologies how we can do work. And it does require that imagination, and delivering it in fast, agile ways. For us as technologists, it is a great way forward to help our industries disrupt ourselves and provide better services to our constituents.
Excellent. The other day we were talking about how the expansion of the CI, or really the CI role in general, has expanded and means different things now. Can you maybe give us some insights on how your role has changed over time and how that is now part of opening up perhaps new revenue streams for BT?
I think it's just it's probably more driven equally by how tech has changed and the perception of technology has changed. It was a means to get certain things done, and from now you look at it. If you look at the top, the top 50 companies around the world, the majority of them now fall in the tech sector, and I think that itself has changed the perception of the art of the possible of tech, where technology itself is a business. And I think that's I feel that's polarized the so-called CIO community, because you'll either have CIOs who are the technologists who can run the tech side of things, but you're also seeing a different breed. I wouldn't just say CIOs, I would say all the CXO roles in technology. So whether it's a CDO or a CIO or a CTO or a combination of any of these. But where a large part of your job is, it's not just on delivering on technology, but using, not building tech for tech, but actually using the tech to drive growth for the business and to build new revenue streams. And cybersecurity is a classic example of what we talked about. I mean, telecoms getting into that. Most of the telcos do it. And in fact, a best place to do it, because a lot of the attacks happen on the data infrastructures, and hence the telcos are the first ones to spot it, because they're the ones who actually carry that as well. So, they have a natural edge. Even enabling and working together with the hyperscalers on the cloud could be another one. Just different kind of marketplaces for enterprise customers, bringing different products to enterprises as well as to consumers. I mean, there are so many different ways, so many alternative revenue streams. In my last organization, we actually ran a full fintech, built a whole fintech organization, and built a large bank, which today has more than 45 million customers at the back of the telco infrastructure. And I think there's, I can't think of a better success story than that. And then at the same point, I think it's just about using that knowledge of technology, not just to build the technology to solve the problem of the business, but to build a business itself, and converting digital into a business. And I think that's what's beautiful about this world, because we've chosen a field that reinvents itself every 2 to 3 years. And if you really want to excel, you have to continue to reinvent both yourself as well as what you do within your company using technology every 2 to 3 years. And I mean, there are very few professions around that actually allow you to do that, which basically means that there is no limit to what we can do. And, it's just a matter of time and money. Those are the only 2 variables in my life, Jason. Everything else is just falls back to those variables. And I think that's what's really exciting about it.
Sure. One of the items that we've often talked about during these sessions are, what are we doing that's new? An interesting question that came in from the Q&A that I thought was worth asking live is, what have you done or instituted that you firmly believe will not serve a purpose after the pandemic? In the sense that there are many things in not only our business lives, but in our personal lives where we say, oh, yes, that was great. I love being able to reserve a swim lane at the pool before I show up. Yes, it was needed during the pandemic, but I want that afterwards. What about things you had to institute that either as a company or as a leader you look forward to doing away with after the pandemic, or it has become no longer needed? And I open that up to whoever answers first.
Well, so one of the things that we found ourselves doing is that our engineers are very busy on trying to design solutions for our clients. So they're now working from home. But we have all these elements that are out of our control. We don't know what kind of Wi-Fi network they have. We don't know what their ISP provider is. They don't know what their home situation is, with the kids gaming, all of that that's associated with it. So one of the things we've reaching out and trying to educate people as to, okay, there's a difference between the different frequencies of Wi-Fi. Here's why you shouldn't use an extender versus a mesh network. All of that I think we're getting past that, because I think people are getting better and more educated, and they've been doing it long enough that they've probably figured out ways to make it work. So that's been a big drain on the team. And it's been our help desk, and we proactively would reach out. We'd be monitoring quality of Teams calls, and then detecting if it wasn't good quality, what was going on. So I think that's going to start to come to an end, because I think people are getting more savvy with what they can do and how to apply different technologies. We're actually testing the Starlink satellite connection now too. Because I think with this work from home, we're going to have people working in some potentially really remote areas. But having a Starlink, 150 megabit, 20 millisecond latency, that's amazing anywhere on the globe. So that it will help improve the ability to have people work remotely and should lessen our need to actually be doing a lot of that work.
So I certainly can see that burden being removed as a positive.
Yeah.
Jason, I'll give you a quick one as well. We stopped debating about upgrading our conference room facilities and everything. The digital employees should have all the tools that they need, in there that they can carry with them. And so, is this whiteboard better than that whiteboard? Is this it? We stopped all of that. And I don't think we'll ever have that discussion again.
Beautiful. I like it. Okay. In the interest of time, I want to ask one closing question for certain for all three of you. We've had a good, solid discussion to date. There's been some good Q&A coming in over the Zoom chat that we'll try to answer offline. But I want you to think about one piece of advice or that critical lesson that you learned throughout this experience to share with those on the call today that are probably going through some of those same complexities, but knowing that they likely were at a different stage of digital transformation prior to the start of the pandemic. Some were, if you're very far along, could be a much different experience than if you were just at the beginning of that trial. So if you can impart that key piece of advice to the audience, let's go ahead and start with you, Andrea.
So I would say widen your aperture on use cases. Don't think that a pandemic is something that wouldn't happen, that because you own assets, your business couldn't be disrupted by a software player. And as you think about the future, widen your aperture on what could happen and start really figuring out what technologies could help you disrupt yourselves.
Harmeen?
I would say two things. One, I would say the pandemic has proven to me that no matter how I thought my job was pushing the boundaries, and I'm considered to be a bit of a disruptive leader, and cause that disruption as well. And I really, and that's where I live. I like to live a little outside the box, and I like to push boundaries. But as much as I thought of that, I mean, the pandemic taught me in saying, in my mind, I would put the growth of digital in my organization also saying, okay, we are at 25%, we'll go to 35 in the next year. I never thought we could go from 25 to 65. So I think one lesson I personally learned is that actually we are our own limitation. No matter how much we think we like to push the boundaries, we never push them hard enough. And much more is possible than what we think. We just have to find different ways to get there. But, sometimes we set our own limits. So I definitely learned that. The second piece that I did learn, and it's a little bit of a personal and a professional lesson both, I just realized you don't need half the things that you think you need to live. And similarly, even in the workplace, we clutter our thinking and our priorities, and we like to do 500 projects. But if you really step back, and when a pandemic hits, and Andy was talking about the same thing, when you focus yourself and you focus the organization towards one or two goals, miracles happen in companies, literally miracles happen. And I think how we bottle that and do that every day, where instead of trying to do hundreds of projects, do 10 projects, have the courage to say, I will only run 10 projects or 20 projects or whatever feels is optimal, and really make them count and do them really well. I think if we can, we can stop this busyness in organizations and get very outcome focused. It'll be a very different economy around the world. And I think it'll free up a lot of things within the corporations, and it'll really change how customer focused we will get. Those are my two lessons.
Excellent. And David?
Yeah, so I think an important element, we were very fortunate that we have pushed ourselves from an innovation perspective so that we were, using these technologies, trialing them, figuring out what works, what didn't work ahead of time. And one of the keys, and I think it's echoed here from Harmeen as well, is that we created a do not do list. We're all really good at adding to it. And just to your point, I mean, is that if you don't have the time to focus on these innovations, it doesn't matter. So you got to bring in that capacity. So it's all about value creation. If it challenge what you're doing every single day and everything that you're involved in, to say, if it's not creating value, why are you doing it? And can you just stop doing it? And I think that was a transformative thing that helped our organization accelerate our digital journey, is to have that capacity, because you only have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Can't change that equation. So how do you deal with it in a different way by freeing up that time and investing and trialing these things early and adopting them early, because you'll learn a lot. Technology gets way overhyped, as we all know. So you'll find out what the hype part is and what the reality part is. Separate the hype out, focus in on that part of it that really does make sense, and experiment so that you can get those learning curves, so that when an event like this happens, all of those things help you prepare. And I'd say that we're very fortunate to have a strong team that's positioned us very well to handle this pandemic.
Great insight. And sometimes it makes me think of the phrase of, fail fast. You're trying out all these new things, they're experiments, they're lab ideas, and that's a good thing. But there comes a point where you need to know when to move on. Did it prove out to your expectations? There's so many other things to do. You just have to know when to cut bait. But at the same time, I listened to what the three of you talked about, within your respective industries, the challenges, the solutions, the new technologies and how you're using them in your everyday business. The applicability that could come about beyond your industry sounds amazing. Earlier, David, I joked about the HoloLens use within your work stream and how it's sci-fi out of the book Ready Player One. But as technology continues to improve, the applicability across areas like education, could be a huge impact on the world. So this is what gets me up every day, the excitement of technology and as it changes. I'm thinking that the old 2 to 3 year cycle, I'm pretty sure it's condensing. It just seems, because every day we wake up and there's a new use case, there's a new technology. It's amazing. But at the same time, we have to focus. And someone actually in our chat just said, Steve Jobs once talked about, you have to shift from trying to do 25, 50, however many products, get it down to the 3. That's what matters. Focus on success there. But I do want to thank the panel, each and every one of you, for your time, your participation. Your insights were fantastic. We look forward to great things from each of you, and how what you learn can be applied not only within your industry, but elsewhere. So with that, Alan, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Jason, Andy, David, and Harmeen for that excellent discussion. And to the audience, I would say let's continue the conversation. Please post your thoughts to the 2021 Symposium program under the topic Digitalization Trends. Also, tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., join us for an open discussion on this week's panels and this week's theme. We want to hear your voice. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Yes, replays will be posted to the 2021 program agenda. That's all for today. Bye for now.